Welcome to the webinar about the Sustainable City Year program, which is a really interesting program that we like to call it a sort of radically simple way to harness the resources that already exist on our campus across the country to catalyze community change out in our cities around sustainability. It's a model of collaborative engagement where we are harnessing existing resources and existing needs in the community and matching those things together to move things forward. Before we get into the details, we want to give you a tad of context on where SCYP, or the Sustainable City Year program, sits. So our larger organization, the Sustainable Cities Initiative, does a whole range of work similarly situated in taking advantage of the resources and the talent and the activities of higher ed and trying to put them into practice to help move society forward. And we do that in a variety of ways, all with the principles that it's applied, interdisciplinary, and sustainability oriented. So we do a wide range of research, as universities do, but again with those principles of interdisciplinary, applied, and sustainability focused. The SCYP program, which we'll get into the details in a moment, we have an active program of research and professional training with professionals in China. We engage in policy and legislation conversations, particularly both at the local level through SCYP, but also at the national level through a variety of agency and elected officials and other ways to get involved to try to change the rules of the game around sustainability. And we do professional training, and we tap a wide range of faculty and experts to do training to get the research into practice, into the hands of practitioners, so that we can move forward and address some of our urgent sustainability needs. But today we're going to talk about the Sustainable City Year program. And this is a program that is in some ways embarrassingly simple and is really just a little twist on what many universities are already doing, but that little twist is a game changer both for our campus communities and for the outside communities in terms of moving forward. So we want to go through that. And the basic question that underlines the whole entire program is this: what if we could connect the existing courses taught in their existing ways with existing faculty to a single city over an academic year to work on sustainability related projects identified by city staff? Now, many of you that are on this that are from universities, or maybe some of you in communities have worked with universities and worked with professors and worked with classes. So the idea of connecting a course to a city project is not new. What we're doing differently is scaling that up to a fairly radical size. Yet it's all based on the courses and the faculty that already exist, doing their existing activities, but sort of leveraging it in a different way. And that forms the basis. And the reality is that there's this tremendous untapped potential. So any professor who teaches a class at the end of every term receives all kinds of fabulous work from students and term papers and final projects, and much of that work never sees the light of day beyond the professor giving a grade. In fact, oftentimes students don't even want to get feedback on their work. And this is a program where we are trying to daylight those brilliant ideas across many disciplines and focusing all that work to one different city over an academic year. So the scale of involvement and impact and buzz resonates both on and off campus. We work across a whole range of disciplines. So some of the traditional disciplines that many might think of in terms of working with communities around the built environment, so planning, architecture, landscape architecture. But for our program here at Oregon, we're also tapping into students and faculty in public policy, interior architecture, journalism, digital arts, product design, business, law, economics, arts administration, geography. And because we're relying on existing courses and existing curriculum and existing faculty, it's also an open model. So we've also worked with civil engineering courses that have been offered from Portland State University here in Oregon. So if there's someone teaching a class that has an applied orientation and it matches well with what a city needs, this is a very open model to take advantage of those existing resources. So I mentioned the scale. what differentiates what we've been running here versus sort of what's been done for a long time, and many times successfully, and many times not so great from universities doing applied work. The thing that's different with what we're doing is the scale. So rather than me as an individual professor calling up a colleague in the local transportation department and saying, hey, I'm teaching a class, is there something that you need? We do that, but at this massive scale. So every year with a different city, we're running somewhere between 15 different projects that translates into 25 to 35 different courses across the campus, again, all targeted to one place. Generally, there's 20 or 25 faculty involved per year, and over the 5 years we've been doing this, 55 different faculty from across 12 different disciplines and 5 schools and colleges on our campus have been engaged. So it's an extremely wide range of people who are participating in this effort. So again, many disciplines. It's an open model for multiple universities to engage if that's as appropriate. Each year, around 500 plus students are engaged through their courses, and we estimate that they're giving somewhere between 60 and 80,000 hours of effort to cities. And these are on projects that cities identify. And we charge. So it takes time and effort to coordinate on our campus side, and as a form of commitment, we expect that cities also have skin in the game, because everything that we want to engage in, we want to make sure has capacity or has potential to put into practice. So we are not so interested in doing hypothetical projects. We want real projects that are identified by city staff, that are part of the existing city work plans, things that are maybe vexing issues that cities are having a hard time working on because they're just too complex, issues that staff just doesn't have time to get to because they just don't have the capacity because they're busy with other things, or issues where city staff just don't have access to the latest and greatest new knowledge, which is something, of course, at universities we're in all the time, understanding best practices, latest research, and wanting to figure out how to get that into practice. And then finally, there's issues from the city side where it's just really difficult politically to have conversations about different ways of going about things. And it's hard internal for staff to maybe take on risk because they want to keep their job. It might be hard to go out into the community and put forward ideas for staff putting ideas forward that might be risky because of the community backlash. And it's often hard for consultants to be overly risky as well because they can risk their next job. Students and what we do in the classroom have the exact opposite qualities. Students are by no means risk averse. You tell them to do something small, they'll do something big. They also have access to the latest and greatest research, and they have a real disarming way to engage with a community and put ideas out into the public domain to help facilitate maybe riskier ideas and help facilitate those conversations around them to try to sort of move a community forward thinking of a new way. I'll turn this over to Nico, who will sort of go through how this project works over a year.
Thank you, and I'm very excited to be here and speaking to all of you and sharing the work that we've been doing in this model. So as Mark mentioned, it's a large-scale kind of effort and endeavor, and it really has a year-long, and really it's about 18 months that we spend with each city to make these things happen. All year long, we are part of the work is simply getting the word out about this model, talking to cities, talking to city officials and staff about the model to get them to understand how it works and to kind of build up their interest and excitement for each year. Where we are right now, so in November of each year, we put out a request for proposals from cities, and that's due at the end of January. We just had ours due here. Where cities, we ask them to put together a proposal that talks about the different projects that they are interested in working in, who the partners are, and the city that they'd be interested both internally with departments and staff and city officials, as well as what community partners are involved. And that gets put into this large RFP. We work with cities to develop this. This isn't a black box kind of approach because we really want them to understand what's available and help them think broadly about it. And then in January to February is when we go through the selection process, working with both former cities that we've worked with, helping them come into the process and help us decide who would be good for the following year, and working with SCI staff and with faculty from across the university to help make that process, to make that decision. We make a decision, and then in March and April is really a whole lot of work doing what we call matchmaking, and this is bottom up, trying to figure out what work the city is interested in having happen, and what courses might that are being taught in the next year might actually work. So there's a whole lot of pounding the pavement, knocking on doors, talking to professors we worked with before. We often get professors that we worked with in the past coming back to us and saying, or professors we've never worked with before saying, what's happening this year? How can I get involved? And this is really going from, it's a really important step because we're taking all these individual ideas that the city has and kind of going through this iterative process of figuring out what matches really make sense, what professors are going to need to get out of their courses, and what the city needs as deliverables. I'll say in this process, what happens is that initial list the city developed, some of the projects might fall out, but many of them are actually expanded upon, or professors will say, I'm actually teaching this other course this year. Might they be interested in this? And that the list kind of grows. In May and June, we're working on developing the contract and developing the relationship with the city itself. And then in July and August, that's when it gets quite busy again, which is that we're doing the course prep for the course that will be starting in the fall, because one of the important things, you have to have all your material ready to go the moment classes start, and that's an expectation that you need to make very clear to your cities. And then we do an open house at the city itself that we're working in. We bring a number of professors there, and we have kind of a session where they get a chance to talk to city staff. We have the general public come in. It's a kind of an introduction to what the work's going to be over the year. And it's a great way of getting people involved from the community, from the city staff itself, to think about how they might plug into the whole process. At the same time, we're also developing a communications plan, which is really important. In every city that we've worked with, we've had a number of kind of front page articles in the local paper. We're on TV. We're on the radio, and it's a great kind of opportunity to help the community understand what is working, what's being done, and to get them involved. Also great visibility for the university, and great way to get the projects moving forward. In September, so classes start for us in September, and we have a kickoff event where we invite city officials, city staff, and community members to the university, and it's really a large event where we're having the provost, president of the university, deans, faculty, mix with the city officials and city staff to help kind of everyone understand what the process is going to be, what the project's going to be, and really build excitement for the event, or for the year. Students are invited to this, and it really lets them see how they are part of a much larger kind of movement, not just what they're doing individually on their project in their class. The courses go, if we're on trimesters here, the courses happen over each term. Sometimes courses will work together in a term, or sometimes they'll work sequentially. We'll talk about that in just a moment. And then at the end of each term, what happens is we pick the 1 or 2 best students from each class. Actually, the faculty picks the 1 or 2 best students from each class, and we hire them to help write reports. And the reports are all available online at SCI's website, where you can see the reports from each one of the classes. And the reports really kind of put together the findings of what work was done, the general findings and best practices that have come out of the work that was done. And those have been very useful to the cities that we've worked with. And then at the end of the 3 terms in May, as the spring term's wrapping up, we have a wrap-up event in the city. And this is similar to the kickoff event that we do on campus, but this time we're going out to the city, kind of presenting all of the work that's happened over the year. A great opportunity for people to look around and see where we've been, and how projects have moved. A great opportunity for students to get up in front of a room full of community members and talk about their work and really get a sense of how their work's impacting a larger scale. And the reports then, the report writing ends up continuing on a little bit in the summer, and then we're already overlapped with the next RFP cycle and going on to the next year. So that's more or less the yearly schedule as it works out. Go to the next slide, thanks. So as Mark mentioned, the SCYP is different than the typical engagement that I'm sure many of us have done working with cities on a specific class or course, which can be very, very fruitful. The big difference here, though, is really that scale question. So as you are looking at 25 courses over a given year going towards one city, it creates a whole lot of energy, excitement, buzz, both from the university side, students and faculty hearing about what each other is doing in different classes, finding ways of putting that work together, almost like a larger sense of purpose. And from the city side, that scale makes all the difference. So I'm not sure the experiences all of you have had in the one-off classes, but sometimes it's difficult to figure out how this project really ties into the larger work going on in a place, or just getting different parts of the city, different parts of the city staff, or different departments, or the community involved. Because of the scale of this, because of the outreach that we do, because of the backing by the city itself, there's a whole lot of involvement. People across departments are kind of working on these projects. Community involvement's happening all the time. We're in the paper all the time. That makes all the difference for both the work that we can get done and the impact of the work that we're doing, and then also the experience for students, how they really feel like they're part of something, getting an experience with that. The multidisciplinary nature, again, we're using 12 to 14 different disciplines in any given year, and those disciplines, there's lots of moments to interact between those classes, sometimes directly, as I said, working on the same project, sometimes sequentially working on the same project. It's an opt-in by faculty, so this is not something that's delegated out or mandated from a provost or a dean. This is across the campus, faculty that are interested in doing this type of work. And I'm not sure if Mark mentioned that there's 20 programs now running across the country and internationally based on the SCYP model. And we hear time and again that the issue that these programs have is not trying to find faculty who would be interested, but trying to find projects for all the faculty that are interested. So there's a number of faculty on all of your campuses, I'm sure, which are interested in doing this type of work. They're interested in either service learning or engagement, or just like the practical application of some of the work they're doing. And this is perfect place for them to get involved. The projects are community identified all the way through. So, and they have got buy-in from the top, city council, city manager, mayor. Which makes them already kind of a projects that are ready to hit the ground running as far as trying to move forward. There's no permission necessary with any of this as far as from the university side. You're teaching classes that already exist that each professor is responsible for, and so as long as you're covering the material that you need to be covering with us, it's simply an opportunity to do more with those classes and to apply them to a large kind of movement. It's fee-based, as Mark mentioned. We charge somewhere between $250,000 and $350,000 a year. We didn't do that in our first year, and most all the programs that are running around the country have different scales of how much they charge, and most of them have not charged in the first year. So don't see that as a huge barrier, but it makes a big difference to have that fee-based work. It changes the nature of how the cities that you're working with see the work that you're doing. They really see it as value add. They see it as something that they engage with in a different way than if it's more, we often think of as kind of a service learning philanthropy almost, that cities are like, well, we'll help these students learn how to do this thing. This is really a very different relationship, which, as Mark mentioned before, has the city put skin in the game, which changes the opportunity and experience for the students, and it also gives you the resources to actually do a whole lot of work, such as putting together reports, creating these events. It's really, really beneficial. It's catalytic. It really changes the discussion that's happening. We specifically look for projects that are in places that they need one small step to get them into a much larger kind of like run, and so that's an important piece of it. And for us, it's statewide. So whereas Oftentimes, universities work with a city that they're in or a city nearby. All these programs are really looking at the state in general, and that changes the nature of the perception of the university in the state, and can have a much broader impact. So we're going to talk a little bit to give you a sense of the kinds of projects that can happen in this. We're going to go quickly through a range of different projects, just briefly describing what they do, but to give you a sense of the kinds of things that can be part of this. Just looking through this, the idea is you can see that some of the projects really have a number of different disciplines that are working on any one thing. And we'll go into that more as we go through. And also the other thing to notice is it's a range of disciplines and disciplines that we typically might not consider easily part of this type of work, of this kind of community work, community engaged work, can really be doing this. So we'll go to the next slide, Mark. So, for example, there's a number of architecture projects we do every year. This, for example, was in Gresham. They were interested in the city hall. They hadn't floated the idea through past the electorate yet, and what they really wanted to do was figure out, one, what would a sustainable city hall be? How would that look, and what kind of issues might they be thinking about? And they wanted to test 3 different sites in the city that might work for that. And so we had one class which does program evaluations, figures out what uses are necessary in the city. They interview a whole bunch of city staff, figured out what each office would need. And then we had 2 studios. The outputs from that class then became the input for 2 different studios that looked at 3 different sites and what kind of issues might happen what might be necessary for a sustainable city hall. That work actually helped build momentum within the city itself for one, really paying attention to the issue of sustainability, and gave them fantastic graphic material to be showing to citizens of these are the types of ideas of what could be happening to our city. And they're actually moving forward on, based on the work that was done this year, they're moving forward on evaluation of 2 of the sites for potential city hall. So this is a project that we did in Salem, in North Downtown Waterfront, typical kind of former industrial area that has been an eyesore in the city for years, very close into the heart of downtown. I'm sure many of the cities that you live in and are around have these, and the question was what to do with it. This is an example of really a number of different disciplines plugging in all into the same area. So we had an architecture urban design studio looking at the larger scale urban design possibilities, planning, 3 planning courses actually looking at a number of different planning issues around the area and regulatory issues. Law was looking at some of the regulatory issues related to some of the state highway and railroads that go through there. And class in civil engineering was looking at some of the traffic issues that they have in the area. So some of the classes happened concurrently. The architecture and the planning classes actually happened together, or design and planning classes happened together and worked together for parts of the term. Other of them didn't, and would actually, the students outside of the classes actually started getting together and talking about some of the issues they'd come up with and how they were affecting the work that the other groups were doing. So just talk about outcomes as well. This was a fantastic, number of different classes all looking at the same thing, coming up with visions that helped the city think beyond what they were looking at. One of the best things that happened out of this is that all the different classes that were looking at this came back to the issue of that transportation was the biggest barrier. The transportation in this area was the biggest barrier to new development, which was the impetus that was needed to get the city council to actually vote for a large-scale transportation analysis of the area. So that, as we said before, we're really trying to get projects unstuck, think beyond with the kind of typical thinking of an area, and move the projects forward in whatever piece might be necessary in the specific situation. This is, again, to give you a range of the kind of classes that can work on these. This is planning and digital arts. Worked on wayfinding issue. This is the city of Springfield, which came and said to us that they have a wayfinding problem in the city because all the signs tell you how to get out of the city and not what's in the city or how to get around it. So this was a great combination of planning and digital arts. Planning students looked at the larger area of Springfield and did a series of surveys to figure out what kind of how the citizens were dividing up the city. From that, they started looking at what they thought were the important parts of the city and what were kind of some of the main attractions. And they actually went out and did an analysis of all the street signs in the entire city, all the signs, all the wayfinding signs in the entire city, and put that on a GIS layer that was then given to the city. You see that up there. And exists. They then came up with a structure for what should be the wayfinding kind of organization and nomenclature, and came up then with how the signs should be organized throughout the city. So for each one of these, you can see here, each one of these locations, they came up with this is what the sign should say, and this is the direction it should be pointing to. And then from that, that was passed over to a digital arts class, which actually did the design of the signs themselves. We had, I think, 12 different students coming up with 12 different versions of what the sign would be to give a different feel for what the city wanted to be. And so this really moved the city ahead tremendously in thinking about, one, what the important areas of their cities were, what the important areas of the city were, how it's perceived by the citizens, and what where they could be heading. Next. So this is a class in economics, and basically the question was, this is again was the city of Springfield. There's a number of the city's always having to trying to pass bond measures or improvement districts to try to create street improvements. And one of the big issues is, how does that relate to the value of the house itself? And so the economics department, which they came to us at one point and said, we'd like to be part of this, and we can do cost benefit of anything. Well, we asked them to do cost benefit of this, and talking to the city, we came up with this project. And so they did a large model kind of looking at all the variables that affected, that they saw were affecting house prices, and how the street improvements would affect housing prices. And this was used by the city as kind of a communication tool to talk to citizens as they're talking about new street improvements, of why it is that they should be supported and what the benefit was to the individual homeowners. Next one. So I'll pass it back to Mark,
okay, so,
and go from there.
Yeah, thanks. You can take a quick break. So it's a whole wide range of projects, hopefully, as you're seeing, in a whole wide range of disciplines. So this was a really interesting project that happens to be faculty on our campus, as I imagine on many campuses, whose area of expertise is around community engagement. And so this is actually a project to help engage marginalized communities that don't have the same level of public voice and public decision-making that society should have, but also as city leadership knew that they were lacking. So in Oregon and in Salem in particular, actually in all the cities that we worked with, the biggest marginalized group is the Latino community. And so this was a project specifically aimed at working with community leaders and community members in the Latino community and city leaders to try to figure out how to improve the engagement and how to build trust actually between the Latino community and sort of the larger decision-making structure of the city. And so there's a whole wide range of activities that got taken place, and really, it's the message here is that city staff knew that they had a problem, that they weren't reaching everyone in their community, and they just didn't have the ability, they didn't know how to do it, and they didn't really have the trust to reach out. This is a great space for students under faculty leadership to really get out into the community and have the types of conversations that you can do with a class of 30 people that can be really difficult from a formal city staff side. And the sort of the net result of all of this was a new building of trusting relationship that has actually led to members from the Latino community taking on leadership positions within formal city structure, and has really sort of catalyzed a change in how things are working in that way. So there also happens to be classes here in arts administration and actually in journalism that do community engagement in various ways as well. So the arts administration program that we have here has a class on cultural asset mapping how do you document and find the value and the assets in a community and build off of that. And so this is something that they're really interested in, but is a type of discipline that many of us otherwise wouldn't necessarily think has anything to do with community engagement and transforming city quality of life. The Metro Wastewater Management Commission Outreach Plan is one of many efforts that our journalism school has actually taken on. They don't get really fancy graphics. They just get a logo. But basically, the School of Journalism does a lot of really great work in trying to tell the stories of different aspects of a community. And so in this case, the project was actually about doing outreach around adopting a waterway for kind of expected types of goals around wastewater, around keeping our waterways clean, around organizing and soliciting volunteers to help in the effort, etc. And so this is another one of those types of projects where, from the journalism side of things, it was a great opportunity to find an issue, a problem, and try to figure out what is a good way to retell the story and reposition kind of the narrative and the action orientation of the community to move forward to meet an existing issue. Sustainable streetlights. This is also a really much like the street sign project that had planning and digital art students. This is also a really interesting collaborative effort or multidisciplinary effort between public administration students being involved and product design students. Many cities actually have issues around the management, the financial management of streetlights, and in Salem there was many different owners of different streetlights, different municipalities and government, quasi-government entities, and it was all kind of a mess. And one of the issues that comes up over time is, should all of the streetlight management be consolidated under city ownership? And so the city wanted to run a whole fiscal analysis whether that would be a good idea to take on the management, or if they did take that on, what would be the price of purchasing them from the other entities. So the public administration students did a whole fiscal analysis. The product design students, on the other hand, took on the issue of looking at making some of the streetlights in the city into using LED. And so they did a whole comprehensive analysis of different types of lighting and the light that they give off and energy usage and where they would be used. And then they fabricated some of the designs that they made to show how that might not only be functional but really be beautiful. And so what you see on the screen are some of their designs for lights that might be along a path in a park. And so these are renderings that they are able to do as well to help communicate to a broad community how this would look and how it would work. And there's a lot of intricacies in how they did their design that I won't get into here, but clearly you can see this is a fantastic way to help a community visualize something different. And the city is going through some testing of this technology and this lighting, which is really exciting. This was a project around biking, also in Salem, and this was actually in a GIS class, a mapping class, and students took on one group of students, 3 students actually, did this project where they wanted to remap the entire street network in the city and give a value to each city about who would bike on it. And so traditionally GIS maps just have one line that represents a city, which is the lower left picture, and they went and digitized in all of the different turn movements that someone on a bike might make at every intersection, and then they gave a whole bunch of criteria and made these maps on the right, which is to say, if you are a strong and fearless cycle, which is the map on the right, you could bike around the city most places. That's really only 1% of our population that is that type of cyclist. All the way to the map on the left is the biking infrastructure for someone who would like to bike but is a little concerned about the infrastructure and their safety. And as you can see, there's nowhere to bike. So this became a really powerful map for the city to recognize, wow, if we really want to change our modal split here and get more people to bike as part of a normal way of getting around, we have a lot of work to do. And finally, in terms of the project parts, the project descriptions, this is a great project that happened out of our business school, and it was an industrial byproduct reuse project, which is essentially to look at the outputs, the waste outputs of one industry to see if they could be inputs to other industry. And there was a group of students that was looking at the sort of food waste and to see if there are ways to treat that more efficiently. And they recognized that there was an anaerobic digester that existed in the city that was way under capacity. So it had a lot of excess capacity. And so this group of students ran a whole business model about how the anaerobic digester could be used in coordination with some of the food waste to both reduce some of the transportation costs that companies were doing by shipping their waste up to Portland, about 100 miles to their north, but also by increasing the volume of material at the anaerobic digester. It could actually be enough to generate electricity and power that could help fuel either a fleet or provide or input into the grid. And so this business case that the student group put together estimated that if the city were to follow their recommendations, it would lead to between $800,000 and $1 million of both cost savings and revenue generation per year. And it was something that the city could see right away and implement immediately, and they did. And a year later, the projections by the students were right on. And so the city is now recognizing that benefit yearly and are now using actually their anaerobic digester as an economic development recruiting tool. So as they're looking for new industry to come locate into their region, one of the assets that they use to recruit new industry is the fact that they can handle their waste locally in an environmental sustainable way. And this was an asset that the city had, but had not even been thinking about using it as part of their marketing as they're doing their economic development. So hopefully you can start seeing that there's a wide range of disciplines that can be engaged. And just as an example, to see sort of how the different disciplines can engage in topics in new and interesting ways than are typically thought about. We put together this slide just to focus on transportation specifically for a moment. In the transportation world, typically goes to transportation planners and transportation engineers. And what we have seen that through our work is that transportation obviously hits a whole lot of different disciplines. And all of these different disciplines have actually engaged in transportation-related topics. And so almost all the disciplines that we've worked with have actually touched transportation, which is really interesting, from bicycle transportation courses, urban design and corridor design from the architecture school, recreational trail work from landscape architecture. I talked about the financial analysis for streetlights from public administration, the spatial analysis of transit and land use that our geography department has been involved in. Nico mentioned the cost-benefit analysis around sidewalk improvements. The law has looked at different regulatory structures. Other journalism work has worked on transit and telling the transit story, the LED streetlights, the business models, the digital arts on the wayfinding, and the civil engineering with the traffic patterns. A whole wide range of disciplines, an expanded set of disciplines, all working on this intersection about how transportation works in our cities and what are all the different aspects of that system that need to be addressed if we want to transition from the way we've been doing transportation to a more sustainable future. So we can't emphasize enough that this has become a vehicle, so to speak, for multiple disciplines to get engaged in ways that we couldn't have anticipated before we started, but have been really powerful for both the city and for our students and faculty.
So this is Nico again. I hope you see that the reason that we've gone through so much of the range of projects that can be part of this is that because part of the strength of this program or this model is the breadth of engagement, it means it has to be beyond any one single discipline or department. And so this was hopefully to give you a sense of how different disciplines around your campus might be able to plug into, and the range of work really as well that cities are interested in having happen, and how students can be effective and really powerful in that in that work. I'm going to talk briefly about some of the benefits across the board for this type of program, the students, university, faculty, private sector, and cities. In terms of students, it kind of gives you goosebumps, the conversations that you end up overhearing from students who are having this experience. They get to work on real world projects in the field talking with clients, it's really they get very excited. A lot of the work that we've seen come out of the projects that have been SCYP classes, the level of work we've heard from many faculty is just raised, because students they know they're not just going to be presenting or turning in a paper. They're talking to a citizen, they're talking to the mayor, they're talking to a city councilor, and that really changes it. It also helps them understand that they need to be engaging with politics and how that really makes projects move forward. So I teach a lot of design studios, and I like to tell them all the time that design is not the answer, design is part of the answer, and this really lets them see the whole other range, how politics, communication, understanding different kind of constituencies and points of view is important to make work happen, push work forward. It gives them all a sense of purpose. That happens all the time as they're working on real-world projects, and I'm sure you've seen many of the work that many of you have done when you start working with communities. It's empowering their education so that they start to see the classes that they're doing, the work that they're doing, especially that it's not simply another class they're taking, but that they're actually gaining skills that make a big difference out in the world. And that's for the education piece, it's a great realization to have students kind of make that shift. And it really just, as I said before, creates a lot of energy and focus. So students we've been very excited to start to see students putting SCYP classes on their resumes as they're going out to talk to employers. They see this as different than their typical classes. As far as to universities and faculty, we like to say, for those of us in public universities, we're putting the public back in public universities. We're really focused on the state, on the communities around us, and that's been a really energizing opportunity. We build the external relationships to the cities that we've worked with, not only to the city staff and electeds, but we're also with the community groups, and that's not just for that year, but those things persist over years, which we've seen kind of overlap onto research agendas that different faculty have had, and all of a sudden they have this huge network of people that they can call on. Also, the internal relationships, and this is not an intended outcome, but we've absolutely seen it. So within the university, different faculty who are working on this in any given year are talking to each other, meeting each other, having an excuse to rub elbows. And that's actually turned into, a few years down the line now that we've been running this, faculty starting to talk about what kind of research they do, and research projects not based on SCYP work that they've done, but based on relationships that were built through SCYP. And so this is a really big opportunity internally. Obviously, the university image and visibility around the state it's all a lot of very positive press, which has made our presidents and provosts very, very happy in the past. Great opportunity for the university to be out there in front. And as I said before, it becomes a platform for research and outreach, both the work that you're doing individually with the community members, as an opportunity to meet other faculty across campus that do research that might be associated with you. And then also you have, as I mentioned before, this incredible network of people out in the field that you can be tapping on as you work on research projects. As far as to the private sector, it gets projects unstuck. So cities, the bureaucracy of cities can sometimes be a drag on getting projects moving forward, and a lot of this work really helps get the projects moving, at which point then the private sector can plug in. If you're interested in sustainability, if you're in the private sector and you work on sustainability projects, we are really educating your future clients. So the city, the citizens, like all of a sudden, for instance, in the City Hall project we gave, sustainability became part of the dialogue, and therefore firms that do sustainability have an easy way of plugging in. We set the groundwork for projects, which has been a great opportunity as the private sector gets a new project. A lot of the work has been done. We also get to test a whole bunch of approaches that the private sector and consultants might have more of a difficult time testing out, because they might be riskier, or they might have a longer gestation time that typically a contract project might be able to have. So students, if you have 15 students in a class working on projects, you can try a whole bunch of different approaches and really broaden the conversation of what's possible within any given project, and you get to develop them to a point where they can actually be evaluated. And so this has led to a whole bunch of kind of interesting new approaches that would not have been able to have been gotten to otherwise. And then there's just the connection with the university. As I mentioned from the last slide, the university has all these connections to the private sector and the public sector, and on the reverse side, the private sector has all these connections to the university. It's almost like a way into the university, understand what happens there and how that might really be a resource for other work. Benefits to cities. Every city that we talk to, the first thing they say is they love the increased capacity. Cities throughout the country and are burdened with not having a whole lot of time or funds to be able to do the work that they'd like to do, and this just really broadens that capacity tremendously. We expand the breadth of conversation. I mentioned that before, but because where each project is being looked at by a number of different students or a number of different teams, you broaden the breadth of what is actually possible. We test the waters for riskier solutions. We tell the cities we work with all the time that it's okay to discredit the student work. Hopefully not all of the work, but we say that so that they can understand that that gives us the leeway to take some risks, to try things that might not be the most obvious or the simplest thing. And if it turns out that it's a great idea, the cities are very happy to take credit for having brought these students on. If it turns out that it's a little bit too risky, it's easy to say, well, these are students. That was one of 15 projects. We've all been students before, and move on. It really gives us a great kind of political cover. Sustainability overlay across all projects for some cities that are trying to figure out how sustainability relates to the work they're doing. It's great for cities that have already adopted a whole lot of sustainability kind of ways of thinking. It gives them a great opportunity to extend that through all parts of their city. Outreach to their citizens. This is not only is it great kind of visibility and outreach for the university, but for cities themselves to find a way of engaging with citizenry. And sometimes that's the citizenry at large, and sometimes it's kind of harder to reach group. We've had a lot of success with minority groups, Latino groups, or economically challenged groups that have had an easier time and feel a lower barrier in interacting with students, feel less risk with that than working directly with the city. Moving projects forward, as I mentioned, marginalized communities, which I was just talking about, and then energy. So both internally and as for the external engagement, every city that we've worked with has said that one of the best things that have come out of SCYP is just the way that the city is energized, the staff is energized about projects, that community groups have come on, something that felt like a kind of drudging process, that this was the energy that students bring and the kind of excitement and that really is motivating and has changed the way that their staff not only looks at specific projects but looks at the work that they're doing day to day, and that's been great for
them. Hopefully, hi. So we have been very fortunate that this program has received quite a lot of attention, some awards, some great press, and when it comes down to it, the work that we're doing, just as a reminder, is based completely on the resources that already exist at the university. These are all just based on the existing courses and their faculty and the students that are just signing up for courses that are part of their existing degree programs across campus. But the key here is harnessing and leveraging them in a different way that adds value to everyone that's involved and enhances the impact on communities and helps train the next generation of our workforce and our leadership. And so we have been actively over the last few years, and this webinar is sort of part of that effort, to help other universities move forward with adopting and adapting the program to fit their own university and community context. Because it's based on the same building blocks that exist at any university, because a lot of the issues from the community side are actually relatively similar across the country, across the world actually, there's a great opportunity to match the university resources to their local communities. And so what we've been engaged in is trying to help that move forward and giving insights from how we've done things here, hopefully lessons that we've learned to make the path forward easier for other institutions. And as you can see on the screen, there's a lot of schools that are doing it. So there's about 20 programs that are up and running or just launching across the US. There's a program in Israel, Spain, and Gabon, Africa, that are also underway that we're thrilled about. because it's all based on this same basic model. One of the key ways that we provide all of the nuts and bolts of the program, so sort of the expanded version of this webinar, including a lot more detail and a lot more opportunity to get questions answered, and including the perspectives of both cities that have participated and now some of the other universities that have set up their own programs. All of that comes together at an annual Sustainable City Year conference. And so this year we're going to be doing our 4th, and it's actually going to be hosted at the Resilient Communities Project at the University of Minnesota. So the University of Minnesota came to our very first conference and proceeded to launch a program immediately. So they have multiple years under their belt, and we're thrilled that this year's conference is going to be hosted by them at the University of Minnesota, which is also a little bit more centrally located across the country. And registration just opened, and this is a fantastic way, again, to get all the nuts and bolts and a lot of the materials that we use behind the scenes to make things work, and to share and learn from others who have moved this forward. So we'd like to thank you for participating. We'll get into questions and answers in a moment. Before we do, we'd like to actually acknowledge and show our appreciation for NITSE. The logo is there at the bottom, which stands for the National Institute for Transportation and Communities. They're a national university transportation center that focuses on the intersection of transportation and livability, and has provided some support to us initially as we were launching the program, and then now in our effort to try to help other universities, particularly those with transportation orientations, get up and running on a similar model. And they've been a fantastic organization that really spans this same space of taking research and best practices and putting them into action across the country. And so we're thrilled to have that support. So I think that should conclude our side of things, and I think maybe we'll turn it over to Liz for some of the Q&A that came in along the way. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks, Mark and Nico. And again, if you have questions, you can submit them on the control panel in the questions tab and send it to the organizer, which is me, and I'll try to get to as many as we can given our time. So the first question is, if you guys could elaborate more on the mechanisms of the fees for the program. Is it a consulting contract? Is university overhead charged? What do the fees cover?
I can go ahead and answer that. So the contract, what we end up having with cities is not to exceed contract, kind of a umbrella contract, which deals with all of the kind of terms and conditions, and then we have a number of individual scopes of work underneath that, and those actually are developed throughout the year depending on the term, and all those are fixed price contracts, which is important. As far as I'll mention one thing, which is first of all, the fact that we're charging $250,000, $350,000 a year, that is not at all how we started. And in fact, we started this with a handshake with a city we were working with that then grew by the end of the year to be about somewhere around $75,000. But that was kind of developed over the year. And most programs that have started in the first year have charged very little. We recommend charging something, but very little, just to get some skin in the game from the cities themselves. The funds are charged overhead from the university because the funds are coming into the university, and then as far as what the funds are used for, it's really a range of things. One of the biggest things it's used for is to pay for a program manager. So we have a program manager that runs the SCYP program and kind of is in charge of all the logistics pieces of that, and that pays for their full salary, or a large portion of their salary. It also pays for the events that we put on, the kickoff event and the wrap-up event. It pays for each class is given somewhere around $1,000 as they participate, to be used for anything they want for that class. So that could be transportation costs, or it could be to buy a piece of software, it could be buy materials, it could be to bring in a speaker. And so for professors, it's just usually a fantastic opportunity to be expanding what they can give the students. Some of the funds are used to pay for the report writing that happens at the end of each term, and that is so those are students who are putting those things together with the guidance of the program manager, but there's a whole lot of hours that are put in by those students, and then for a lot of the printing of those reports and dissemination. Is there anything you want to add, Mark?
Let me just jump in here. Yeah, I'll just add one little thing on the funding side. So the source of funds from the city generally are not a big chunk from the general fund, because most cities don't have that from their general fund. The way the funding works from the city is it's really a whole bunch of, let's just say, $15,000 contracts or $15,000 chunks for projects. So if we're working with the Public Works Department and they have a couple projects, they might put in $30,000. If we're working with a Parks District, they might put in $15,000. If we're working with a private developer and the economic development team of the city, that might be $15,000, et cetera. And when we're working across a number of projects over the year, it adds up to a big number. But these are relatively small chunks of money connected, again, to projects that are already in the work plan or the goals of the city. So this is not sort of outside of the city budget or outside of the city work plan. These are things that the city wants to move forward and sort of decentralize in a decentralized way. Line staff or line managers or department managers are putting some of their own budget skin in the game, and then it adds up to this big number.
And I'll add, just to give you a longer laundry list of where the money can come from. General fund, urban renewal or redevelopment districts, oftentimes a lot of funding comes from that. School district, park districts, utility districts, private developers, NGOs, that's the biggest. So it's really a range of different funding sources from the city. And one of the big conversations we have with cities as we start out is just to get them to understand these are a lot of small chunks, and that they're also not all coming directly from the city.
So I can jump in here. I think I have a range of other questions that I see that people have been putting forward, and I'll just sort of list out the questions, and Nico and I will tackle them. So a few questions that have come up are: is the program limited to cities only? How many proposals do we get each year? How do we ensure student quality control? And then how is sustainability defined for our program? Which are all fantastic questions. So I'll start, and then when I'm done talking, Nico, you can join in.
Okay.
So our program is limited to cities only. Not necessarily. Our main point of contact has been cities, and it's really important that there is sort of a single administrative entity that is the coordinator of the arrangement. Just administratively, it makes it a whole lot easier. Involved in our projects are some of the entities that Nico was just mentioning, implied from the funding. We've had transit districts, school districts, park districts, nonprofits, and private sector folks, all involved with money, but channeling them through a single city point of contact. We have talked about, but have not executed yet, having a county be a point of contact and maybe being the coordinator for a few small cities inside of that county. We've talked with, in our state, the Port of Portland as potentially a lead, with transit districts as potentially the lead, and also with Native American tribes as a lead. So it's for us, the requirements from who we partner with are kind of threefold. One, they need to have a range of projects that meet the range of disciplines that we have on our campus. They need to have a sustainability aspect to them, so we can talk about what that means exactly, although we keep a pretty broad definition of that. And we don't expect the cities to exactly know what that means. That's where our area of expertise is. And we need to have proof of buy-in from the top of the organization. So that's mayor, council, city manager, depending on the form of government, and then the funding that goes associated with that.
I'll just add, we talked about we've had proposals from counties, and which have been great. The one thing that you need is to make sure that that there's one kind of central body that has some kind of jurisdiction over the range, so that you can actually kind of have leverage to get the work done. That'd be the only piece of what cities are a great entity for that, but there's others that you can do that with as well. As far as how many proposals we get in any given year, it really ranges between 2 and 5, which is a great range. It's a good amount of work to put the proposals together. And what's often happened is years that the cities that we don't pick one year end up applying again a second year, with help from us to help them think about how to make the proposal stronger. That's actually worked well for us. How do we ensure student quality control? So this is something that we thought was going to be much more of a problem than it actually is. One of the things that we do is one of the things that helps the model work is that it's really kind of grassroots effort. After we figure out what city we're going to work with, and we think about kind of the first range of projects, as the projects start getting aligned with a specific course, the professors and the staff person in charge of that course or in charge of that project really do a whole lot of communicating and talking about what kind of work is going to be beneficial for the city and what kind of work the students can produce. So the professors typically have a pretty good sense of the type of work that any student can produce in a given year, and therefore in that discussion are pretty savvy and do a pretty good job of making sure to manage expectations, which we talk about all the time with the professors, making sure that we're managing expectations to make sure that we under-promise and over-deliver. The other thing that helped us with two other pieces that help us really with the quality control is, one, we talk openly with cities as we start out to say, not every bit of work that students do is going to be out of the ballpark. Everyone's been students, everyone's been in school, and they know that they're going to get a range of work. And that's actually a good thing. On the one hand, as I said before, it lets us be riskier on some projects, but it also covers for some projects that might not, some student work that might not be quite up to the level that we would have hoped. Unfortunate, but does happen, as we all know. That lets having the conversation early on with students helps kind of cover that. And the last part is really doing the reports. Picking a couple students to do the reports, and as a kind of a filter for the work, finding a way of putting the kind of best points forward has really helped with that as well. And I'll say originally when we started this out, we were quite concerned that making sure that we had a really high quality of student work. I won't say that we're not concerned about that anymore, but it's less of a worry. Year after year, we found that really hasn't been an issue.
Okay, so our next question that we received is why would the conference be worthwhile to attend, or what's sort of the value added of the conference?
So I guess I can start with that. So the conference is actually amazing and fantastic. I obviously have a bias, but it tends to be a collection of amazing people trying to make a difference both on their campus and in the communities. And what we love to have is for more than one representative from a university to come, and if possible, to bring a potential city partner with them. And we develop content over the 2.5 days to meet all of that. And so the first day of the conference is really based on an expanded version of this webinar. So a lot more into the weeds about the scopes of work and contracts and budgets and outreach and building internal support on campus. You hear from both us, and so more from Nico and I, but also from some of the other programs that have adopted and adapted the model for their own campuses and communities. So there's a whole wide range of ways that different institutions and communities have put this successfully into practice, which is really great. So there's just a whole lot of details that we cover. And the real goal of this gathering is to help you put this program into practice. So what we really want people to leave with is an action plan and momentum and a vision forward for making this program happen. And so, when we've done this in the past, there have been a couple of programs that came to the conference and they went back to campus and went back to their city, and within months we're up and running, which is unbelievable. Some other programs took a year to plan that out. But the goal for us is really to provide, in a very transparent, open way, as many resources and materials as possible to help move you forward. The second day is much more around sharing across the different programs and best practices. things that people have been doing that have been working great, things that programs have been doing that haven't been working as good, and brainstorm so that we can all learn from them. And then we talk a bit about, both on that second and third day, how as a group of programs that are running this different type of model, how we can leverage our own collective resources to be smarter and better of how we do things individually, and how collectively we can continue to push for rethinking the way that we use higher ed to catalyze change across the country.
Yeah. So it's really both a logistics how-to, and we give copies of the contracts we use, the scopes of work, our budgets. The idea is really, and this year we're going to be not only having from our program, but from a number of different programs. So there's a whole lot of opportunity to learn how to do this thing. And as Mark said, it's a fantastic opportunity for networking across across the country, programs that are interested in people who are really interested and passionate about doing this work, learning from each other, and getting connected.
Great, thanks. Could you talk about what scale we started at, and how did we go about getting initial buy-in from the city, and just sort of what are the first steps for starting out?
That's a great question. And it's been fun now because we've been able to see a number of different programs launch all over the country. And I'll say that there's not any one story for how it works. Our program, I'll tell you, we started out, we had a relationship, a contact that we had as city manager in a city that was 2 hours away from us. We should mention as well, the cities we've worked with are distance-wise 2 hours away, an hour away, 5 minutes away, and 2.5 hours away. So it doesn't have to be the city right there that you work with. But the first city we work with, we just kind of pitched this idea of, we'd like to try this out, working with having a number of classes work with your city. And as we said, it started on a handshake, and eventually, because it was taking a tremendous amount of a good amount of effort, we talked about having funding associated with it. The most important thing was getting buy-in from the city manager and the electeds that this was something that was going to be valuable to the city. The good thing is that a number of the programs that have started since then have models, not only us, but other programs around the country to kind of point at to help cities understand what the value add, and to have faith and trust that this thing will work. There's been a range of different ways of starting. Typically, the most important thing is developing that relationship with a city. Some people have started with RFPs as a first step. Others have just approached cities, relationships that they had with cities, or relationships they've developed with cities, and said, "Hey, this is something we'd like to try out. Is this something you want to talk about?" And launching that way. So it really is a range. The most important things, actually, as far as first steps to get going, is one, building the support internally within the university to do something like this, kind of having a champion, and then a kind of a group of champions who really want to put this together and work on it. And two, developing a relationship with the city that they're going to be working in the first year.
Great. How is sustainability defined in the context of this program?
I can jump in. This is Mark. So we take a pretty broad definition to sustainability. And in fact, with some of the cities we've worked with, even here in Oregon, we weren't allowed to use the word sustainability at first, which was fine by us because the outcomes that we're pointing to work just as fine as we're calling them community quality of life, and efficient use of public resources, etc. And so we have a pretty broad definition, and you can see by the types of things that we engage in there. So fundamentally, anything that we can do to help reduce CO2 emissions from cities is key. And so part of that is transportation, part of that is land use, and part of that is all of the things that go around that, from business practices, law, policy, financial stuff, to make the urban form such that it's yielding less CO2 emissions than currently. But then we also do quite a bit of work on the social side, as was talked about earlier, with community engagement and sort of raising the consciousness of a range of voices to participate in making public decisions. So we really take a broad swath of that. And this is one thing that may be a little bit different at the University of Oregon than some other institutions, is that we have sustainability work happening across our campus as fundamental parts of a range of disciplines. So our law school has a whole environmental program, our journalism school has a whole environmental program, our business school has a whole environmental and sustainability program. And so for us on our campus, we don't have a token sustainability person, and we don't really even talk about sustainability all that much individually or in our classes, because it's very much in the culture here. So that bit might change here or there at other institutions, but fundamentally, if we're talking about things like shifting the use of private automobiles to other modes of transportation, then we're also talking about making it easier for kids to be able to walk to school, right? So you don't have to approach it with a sustainability chip on your shoulder. What all you're trying to do is increase, physical activity for our kids and community quality of life, and make it easier for parents not have to schlep their kids to school all the time. So there's a lot of ways into working on these issues that have sustainability outcomes, which again fundamentally for us is a CO2 reduction, but they don't necessarily have to be framed explicitly in that way. So anything we can do to move things in the right direction, we feel is worthwhile doing. There's so far to go that anything we can do to push the needle in the right direction for our local communities and educate, re-educate in some cases, city staff and general communities, then the better things will be moving forward.
I'll take, I think, what might be our last question, which was a question on number of grads and undergrads, or grads and undergrads involved in this. And the answer is yes. So we've got a number of graduate classes across all these departments working on this. And for undergraduates, we have classes, typically classes that are advanced undergraduates, so juniors and seniors. We have had some grad classes that are introductory grad classes that worked on this. It's a whole lot of ramping up, and the professors who teach those classes are confident they can do that each year. And we've also have some classes that are mixed grad and undergrad. So there's some classes at UofL that do that, and they've been extremely successful. So yes, both grads, undergrads, advanced undergrads, and mix of the two has happened.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Mark and Nico. That wraps up the time that we have for this presentation. I'll be sending out a link to the recording of this presentation in the next few days. And if you have any questions, you should feel free to contact me, and I'd be happy to direct you to some resources or talk to you more about the program. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you all.
Thank you.